Two twins stood on a cracked sidewalk in Los Angeles, silently offering their only toy for $20. No begging, no signs of panic, just a quiet urgency that no one noticed until Keanu Reeves did, drawn in by something. He couldn't explain. He stopped, but what? He would uncover just beyond that. Sidewalk was far more than a sale. It was a hidden cry for help and a truth no one was prepared to face. Los Angeles was bathed in the golden hue of late afternoon. The rain had stopped moments earlier, leaving the pavement wet, and reflective light bounced off puddles. Like the city had cracked into shimmering glass, traffic rolled by. Lazily distant horns echoed between buildings, and outside a high-end toy store, gleaming glass windows, pristine white walls, and shelves of perfectly lined action figures. Two boys stood still, twins. They looked about 10 years old, skinny, quiet, with small, worn-out backpacks slung over their shoulders. One stared at the toy car between them. The other kept his eyes on the street, always scanning. Between them sat a red toy car, old plastic, but cleaned with clear care. The wheels were taped, the plastic slightly faded on the hood taped in place. A piece of cardboard with uneven black marker letters, $20 for sale. Neither of them said a word. One gripped his backpack tightly, chin lowered. The other stood firm, shoulders squared, alert. "Keep your eyes out," the quiet one whispered. "I," and the other replied without looking. "Do you think anyone will stop? They have to. We just need 20." The first boy lowered his gaze again. A faint bruise marked the inside of his elbow. Subtle, but there. "You think he'll let us come back in if we get the money?" The other didn't answer right away. "I don't know, but at least maybe he won't yell." They fell silent. The sun hit the store window, casting a warm glow over the rows of shiny new toys. A remote control robot, a blinking fire truck, a spinning propeller plane, all glittered under the light. But on the sidewalk, the little red car at their feet was from another world. "Remember when we got him?" the quieter twin asked, soft. "I remember. It was Christmas. Mom stayed up all night building the track on the carpet. We broke the wheel on the first day, and she fixed it with kitchen tape." The other one said with a short laugh. "And now we're here. Now we're here." Minutes passed. People walked by, some glanced, none stopped. "Maybe we should have written 10K. The more serious boy said. "10 doesn't cover it, but at least it might sell. Faster turbos worth 20. Mom always said you should value the things you care for." "But we're selling him anyway." Silence. The boy crouched down and adjusted the toy car, straightened the cardboard sign, wiped away an imaginary speck of dirt with a sleeve. "Turbo," he murmured. "Just a little more. Okay, hang in there." The other boy looked at him with quiet warmth. Then his eyes drifted again across the street to an aging apartment building with peeling paint and rusted balcony railings. His jaw clenched. "Is he up there?" "Don't know. Don't let him see us. Here, don't look," the other warned. "Just pretend we're selling it for candy." "But we're not." "Pretend." Anyway. A well-dressed woman passed by and looked away. A man with a briefcase didn't even notice them. A child stared at the boys for a second, but was quickly pulled along by her mother. "They never stop, do they?" "They don't, even with the sign." "Even with the sign? Then why did we make it for someone who wants to see?" The quieter twin lowered his head again. "I hope someone sees." Across the street, Keanu Reeves stepped out of a quiet cafe, alone, coffee in hand. He wore dark jeans, a black jacket, and simple sneakers. His hair was loose, a little messy, falling over his brow. He wasn't in a rush. He was just walking until something pulled his eyes. Across the street, two boys, a toy car, a cardboard sign. He stopped at the crosswalk. Something about that scene rooted him in place. The car wasn't just a toy. The boys weren't just standing there. There was stillness in their posture, but it wasn't peace. It was restraint. Keanu watched them for a few long seconds. Then the light changed. He took a step into the street, drawn toward them by something he couldn't explain. Not yet. The toy might have been cheap, but the scene weighed heavy. Keanu felt it in his chest. This wasn't just a sale. It was a quiet scream hidden in plain sight. Keanu approached slowly. The boy saw him coming and stiffened, as if unsure whether to stay or run. He stopped a few steps away, not too close, not too distant. "So, is this guy really for sale?" he asked, nodding toward the red toy car. The taller twin glanced down. "Yet 20 bucks." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Seems like he's got some stories." The quieter twin Shrugged, he's just old. Now Keanu knelt down beside the car, gently running his fingers over the faded hood. The wheels wobbled a bit, but the whole thing had clearly been cleaned carefully, lovingly. Someone had even polished the plastic with oil or soap to make it look newer. "You two cleaned him up last night," said the smaller boy, eyes fixed on the sidewalk. "He was dusty." "What's his name?" The two boys exchanged a glance, as if wondering whether it was okay to answer. "Turbo," the older one said. "Finally, Turbo, how that's a good name." Keanu smiled. "The boys, didn't he?" Pulled out his wallet and unfolded a crisp $20 bill. "All right, I'll take him." They hesitated for a second before accepting the money. One of them carefully peeled the taped cardboard sign off the car's hood, trying not to rip it. Keanu stood up and lifted the toy car, holding it with surprising gentleness. He looked at the boys again. "You sure you want to let him go?" The quiet twin looked away. The other nodded. "We need to." Keanu sense something behind those 3 words. Not desperation, but urgency. Not drama, but purpose. They weren't playing, saving up for something. Kind of. The talkative twin replied, his voice suddenly quieter. "A game console, a school trip, something like that." The smaller one shifted, uncomfortably adjusting his backpack. He kept his head down. His voice was barely audible. "Just don't tell our stepdad." Keanu's expression didn't change, but something in his chest tightened slightly. "Don't worry, I won't say a word." They both nodded, but still didn't smile. Keanu stood there for a few seconds, unsure whether to ask more. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was thick, private, untouchable. He turned to leave, carrying Turbo in his hands. Behind him, the boys grabbed their backpacks. One of them took a last glance across the street toward the apartment building, but didn't say anything. They walked off quietly. A few seconds later, a folded piece of paper Slanu stood motionless on the sidewalk. In one hand, he still held the small red toy car, in the other a damp, grease-stained piece of folded paper, the one that had slipped from the boy's backpack and landed softly on the wet pavement like it had been waiting for someone to care. He opened it carefully. A handwritten prescription, slightly torn at the corner. The ink had bled into the paper. Red pen across the top read, "Urgent, take to hospital if symptoms continue." It was dated 2 weeks ago, already expired. He looked at the name on the paper. It was a woman's, a name he didn't recognize, but that didn't matter. Something in his chest stirred. This wasn't just a coincidence, not a misplaced note. It was a warning, a lifeline left dangling in silence. He folded the paper and slipped it gently into his jacket pocket. Then he looked down the street. The twins had already turned the corner of their small frames, disappearing beyond a row of parked cars. Keanu took a deep breath, then followed. He moved quietly with intent. Years of experience on chaotic film sets and even more chaotic city streets had made him an expert at moving without being seen. He wasn't hiding, but he wasn't being obvious either. He rounded the corner and saw the boys again, walking ahead of him on the sidewalk. They weren't holding hands or talking, just walking, eyes down, bodies leaning forward like they were trying to disappear into their own shadows. They passed a series of rundown shops, a liquor store with broken neon, a boarded up laundromat, a pawn shop with bars on the windows, and old TVs stacked like relics from forgotten homes. Keanu stayed close behind, watching. They didn't beg, didn't talk to anyone, just kept walking. A man on a bench glanced at them. A woman pushing a shopping cart full of bags looked away. Nobody seemed surprised to see 2 unsupervised boys wandering through this part of town, but something about them didn't belong here. They were too careful, too quiet, too heavy for their age, and that heaviness Keanu felt it more with each step. The neighborhood changed block by block. The smooth concrete turned to cracked sidewalks, potholes scattered like scars across the road. Windows had bars, walls had tags. Street lights flickered with a buzzing sound, casting long yellow shadows that made everything feel colder. As Keanu followed, the city seemed to close, and the boys turned into a narrow alleyway between 2 buildings. He slowed, waited, then peeked around the corner. There they were, climbing a metal staircase attached to a battered apartment complex, 3 stories tall, the paint peeling, a mattress leaning against the dumpster below. Keanu watched from a distance staying hidden beneath a bent street lamp. The boys moved like they'd done this 1,000 times, careful not to make noise, avoiding the center of each step so the metal wouldn't creak. Halfway up, the taller twin paused and looked toward a second-floor window. A dim light was on behind a torn curtain. He hesitated, then kept climbing. Kanu's jaw tensed. He stepped closer, his boots landing softly on the damp alley concrete. From the street below, Keanu could hear voices through the open window above, a man slurring, then silence. Then louder, a chair scraped, something heavy hit the floor glass. Maybe. Then you sold. With the shout hit like a slap, Keanu flinched. The voice echoed down the fire escape and into his gut. He stepped back into the shadows, barely breathing. A second later, the curtain shifted. A shadow moved across the window. Large, unsteady, a bottle dangled from one hand. The other slammed flat against the wall. He wasn't just angry, he was drunk, enraged, out of control. And then came the softest thing Keanu had heard all day. One of the boys' voice, small and broken, barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, we just wanted to help." Keanu's grip tightened on the toy car. His other hand slid to the pocket where the folded prescription sat. His pulse had quickened, but not from fear, from clarity, from knowing he recognized this too many kids carried this same weight, the one no child should have to carry. He stepped farther into the alley, just enough to see the full building. A broken street light buzzed. Overhead, trash was piled beneath a grated window. The scent of urine and old oil filled the air. Someone yelled in the distance. A car revved hard and disappeared. Keanu looked up again. The second-floor window stayed lit. The silhouette swayed. Another thud echoed from within, the kind that sounded like a drawer being slammed, or worse, his fingers curled around the toy car's side mirror. He remembered something his sister once told him: when kids lie to protect someone else, that's when you know the danger's real. And those boys had lied, not for themselves, but to protect someone sick, someone broken, or maybe both. He turned toward the entrance to the stairwell, half rusted, half rotted. Took a step forward, stopped, looked back toward the street, but no one else was coming. No one else had followed those boys. No one else had picked up the paper. No one else heard what he heard. It was just him now, and a decision to make. He looked at the toy car again, still damp from a sidewalk, still faintly warm from their hands. It wasn't just a toy, it was a symbol, a lifeboat, the last thing they could give. Up from above, another voice cut through the air, deeper, angry again. "You think you're smarter than me, selling that crap behind my back?" And then silence. Nothing. Keanu stepped into the stairwell. Each step creaked beneath his weight, but he moved with calm, steady. He wasn't here as an actor or a celebrity or someone trying to be a hero. He was just a man who couldn't walk away. Not this time. He reached the landing of the second floor, paused. A faded number 204 was barely visible on the cracked door. He could hear someone breathing heavily inside, footsteps pacing, then a cough, harsh and wet. A woman. He closed his hand into a fist, raised it, and knocked behind door 204. Someone paused. The air on the landing turned cold, and Keanu, hard, steady, waited, knowing what came next might change everything. The door opened only a few inches. A small eye peered through the crack. It was one of the twins, the quieter one. His face was pale, the same bruise Keanu had seen earlier now looked darker under the harsh indoor lighting. He didn't say anything, just stared. Keanu didn't push. "Hey, it's me from the toy store." The boy hesitated, then slowly unlatched the chain and opened the door. All the way Keanu stepped in, the apartment smelled like damp laundry, alcohol, and something faintly metallic, the kind of air that clings to sadness. Inside, it was dim. A yellow bulb flickered above the kitchen. The hallway was narrow. The carpet stained a thin layer of dust covered a small table where unopened envelopes were stacked in. The far room, coughing, harsh, wet, rattling. Keanu followed the sound, stepped carefully into the living room, and saw her, a woman, mid-30s maybe, lay curled on a worn-out mattress, pushed into the corner of the room. Her skin was pale, her lips dry. A bowl of cold soup sat untouched beside her. A plastic cup, half filled with water, shook in her trembling hand. She looked up as Keanu entered, trying to lift her head. "Who?" The boy answered for him. "This is the man who bought Turbo." Her eyes softened. She Tried to smile at cracked halfway, I told them not to bother anyone. Keanu kneeled beside her, gentle and unthreatening. They didn't bother me, they impressed me. She coughed again, turning her face to the wall. The sound tore through the room like something sharp. There were pill bottles on a nightstand. One was empty, another was tipped over. None of them looked new. Keanu glanced around the room, told a whole story, missing her fingers curled around the edge of the mattress. Then she nodded once from the kitchen. The sound of a bottle shattering. The man shouted again, but Keanu was already dialing his phone. He wouldn't leave them here another night. Not now, not ever. Keanu's car sped through the night. The city lights smeared across the windows like streaks of motion and memory. In the back seat, the twins sat quietly, each holding one of their mother's hands. She was curled between them, her breathing shallow, face pale under the overhead lights. Keanu didn't speak, not to break the silence, not to add to their fear. Only the GPS spoke, cold robotic, counting down the blocks to the nearest ER. When they arrived at the emergency entrance, Keanu helped lift the woman gently into a wheelchair. The boys jumped outright behind him, clinging to her sides. A nurse at the front took one look and rushed them inside without questions. Within minutes, she was behind curtains, and the boys were seated on a hard plastic bench. In the hallway, Keanu sat beside them, hands clasped, elbows on his knees. The younger twin finally whispered, "Will she be okay?" Keanu turned to him. "The doctors are doing everything they can. You got her here just in time." The boy nodded, but didn't look convinced. The older one stared at the floor for a long time, then finally said, "She got sick a while ago. She kept coughing, then she stopped eating. Why didn't you ask for help sooner?" Neither of them answered until the younger one spoke again. "Because he said if we told anyone, they'd take us away from her." His voice cracked on the word her. Keanu looked at them both. "And what do you think would have happened if you hadn't done anything?" They didn't answer that either, but the silence was loud enough. Half an hour later, a doctor appeared. Tired eyes, calm voice. "She's stable for now, but her lungs are inflamed. It's advanced pneumonia, likely untreated for weeks. She's also severely anemic." The words dropped like stones in the space between them. The younger boy buried his face in his hands. Keanu stood, voice steady. "What happens next? We'll admit her tonight, start oxygen and 4 antibiotics, but she can't go back to that apartment. She needs rest, safety, a clean space." Keanu nodded. His decision had already been made. She won't go back. Later, in the dim hospital waiting area, Keanu bought them hot chocolate from the vending machine. The boys sat on either side of him on the bench, small hands wrapped around the warm paper cups. For the first time, the older twins spoke without hesitation. "We sold the car because our stepdad spent everything on beer. He drinks every night, yells, sometimes throws stuff, and sometimes he forgets we're even there." The younger added. Keanu let their words hang. He didn't rush, didn't speak over them. Then softly, "I lost my mom young too, and my dad was never really there. I know what it's like to grow up fast." The boys looked at him, their eyes said, "You do?" He nodded. "That's why I'm still here." The younger one blinked. "We didn't think anyone would help us. Everyone just walks past." Keanu's hand tightened around his cup. "Not everyone, and certainly not Emma." Nurse stepped into the waiting room. "She's asking for her boys," she said. And as they stood, Keanu looked down at them and whispered, "Let's go remind her she's not alone anymore." 3 days later, the air smelled different, not of bleach and hospital food, not of mold and alcohol, but fresh paint, warm linens, and sunlight leaking through clean windows. Keanu stood in the small yard of the emergency shelter, watching the twins run through the garden paths, cautiously at first, then faster, laughing for the first time since he'd met them inside the house. Their mother sat upright in bed, still weak, but breathing. Better color had returned to her cheeks. The shelter staff brought her tea and medication right on time. The place was simple, shared rooms, meals cooked in turns, but it was safe. And that was everything. Keanu stood beside the program director, a woman in her 40s with tired but kind eyes. "We've had cases like this before," she said, "but rarely do they come with someone like you stepping in." Keanu shook his head gently. "I just saw 2 kids selling a toy car. The rest just followed the woman. Smiled. Sometimes that's all it Takes that afternoon, Keanu brought them. A gift. He opened the trunk of his car and pulled it out. Turbo, the little red toy car, now polished with the wheels. Repaired. When the boys saw it, they froze. You kept him? One asked softly. I told you I'd take care of him. Didn't I? He placed the car on the grass. The twins crouched beside it, touching it like it was made of gold. We thought you'd forgotten. I never forget the things that matter. There was a long pause. Then the older twin looked up and said, one day, we'll give him to another kid like you. Gave it back to us. Keanu smiled. Foreshadow a promise planted that night. The twins sat on their new beds there. Mother was resting across the hall, no yelling, no fear, just quiet. The younger one whispered, do you think this will last? The older one paused. I don't know, then added, but I think he means it. I think he really wants to help. From the hallway, Keanu overheard. He didn't interrupt, just sat in the quiet and let the moment breathe.